Very wet. Yes, wet sunny. So Cass and I are both from Brisbane, so it's very wet here too. We've had it's been wet for the past couple of weeks, really.
Mm.
Yeah, we've have it very having some very wet weather. Okay, well we're at one past. So I think that's probably given people enough time to log in. So today we're talking about making accounts receivable work for your clients. So this is a topic that we tend not to talk about that often. We tend to more to focus on accounts payable. So I think it should be a interesting, thought-provoking session. So if we just go to the next slide, I might introduce. So introduce myself. So my name's Justin Campbell. I'm one of the product experts here at ApprovalMax. And I'm very lucky to have with me our head of bookkeeping, Cassandra Scott, on the call as well. So a lot of you might already know Cassandra from different industry events and things. So Cassandra is quite well known in the bookkeeping industry. So thanks for joining us today, Cass.
Thanks for having me along, Justin. Always a pleasure.
Great. All right. Well, we might go to the next slide then. So we're going to start today's session with a poll. So it's going to be, what's your biggest challenge when providing accounts receivable service for clients? And we've got a few options here. We've got, I've never thought about it as a distinct service offering. I'm not sure how to charge for an AR service. Uh, I have I have challenged engaging clients with the workflow. I'm unsure how software could support this. So yeah, that you don't necessarily have the software tools to help you do this.
I think when we're looking at AR as a service too, Justin, what we want to focus on is it being a proactive service with clients. So not just sort of sitting and recording sales invoices into accounting software retrospectively, but actually being a front forward client facing and by client facing your clients facing um, service provider. So being actually proactive in what you're delivering on behalf of your clients and helping them streamline the way their accounts receivables processes actually work.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and that's what we're going to go through today is sort of go into one how we as service providers can help our clients, but also sort of like why there's value in that and why we think it's actually something that clients clients would be willing to pay for. So we could has everyone voted yet? Can we see those results? Okay, so we've got a bit of a mix here. So we've got 56% of people who said I never thought about it as a distinct service offering. And then very closely, we've got I'm not sure how to charge for AR services, and only 11% I have challenged engaging clients with the workflow. I'm unsure how software supports it. So yeah, actually that's the biggest response, which is right, because if you only were using, Zero, MyUp, QPO, there really isn't a way to sort of support your clients with this. But we can go through the options for that today. All right, so let's go to the next slide. Okay, so I guess this is a question to you, Cass, which is reasons to consider expanding in an AR in an accounts receivable, because it's not something we normally think of when we're
Mm.
thinking as bookkeepers and accountants about the services we'd offer to our clients. Yet at the same time, we all know that our many of our clients are working back really late at night to get quotes and sales invoices to customers. So I'd be keen to hear your thoughts here.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting point. And what was interesting in those poll results, Justin, is more than half of the people hadn't even thought about accounts receivables as a service, as a discrete service line within their practices. I think historically, as bookkeepers and potentially the accountants that are in the room as well, we've considered accounts payables as a service. So it's easy to talk about the processing of bills into our accounting systems, raising batches, sending those off to clients for approval. Um, facilitating the payment into the bank and then sort of sending remittance advices out to the suppliers. So it's been sort of something that I think natively we've done for a large number of years, even before we stepped into cloud-based accounting software. But the concept of accounts receivables, and as a practice or former practice owner myself, I never actually considered it realistically as being a distinct service line. We always thought about the processing of customer sales invoices as something that was potentially done retrospectively, or that was better suited to the client to do because they're closer to the services that they've been delivering. And yet, you don't have to go terribly far or have terribly many conversations with your clients and, tradies out there, particularly where you hear stories about them spending, copious amount of time on weekends or, working until 10 or 11 o'clock at night after they've had a big day out on the tools or getting up really, really early in the morning to actually get the sales invoices or the quotes. And I see client quoting as part of the AR as a service model as well, getting that stuff out to their customers so that work can continue, money keeps coming in. If we're talking about quotes and proposals, it's that the work continues to fill the pipeline. When you start taking people into those situations, there's a few considerations. Firstly, they're damn good plumbers or electricians or consultants or whatever, but they're not generally terribly good bookkeepers or accountants. And what that often means is when they're processing or preparing those documents from an accounting perspective, we may have some challenges with that data. It could be everything from are they using correct inventory items to service lines, is the GL coding being correct? So we're putting the responsibility of something that can be quite critical in terms of the accounting treatment into the hands of somebody that isn't an expert at that. It'd be like giving me a PowerPoint to wiring. Wouldn't want to see the results of that afterwards, and I'd hope you'd be really well insured. You're taking individuals away from work-life balance and precious time with their families potentially, or to focus on and deliver the services that they're actually really, really good at within their businesses. And everything that actually comes with that. So, if we're talking about the family work-life type balance, again, you don't have to go very far to find out, have those conversations about, my husband or wife is getting really peed
Mm.
off at me because I'm working until all hours of the day or night. The wife is often the tradie's wife is probably a classic example, doesn't know which end of a computer is which, but is then, tasked with the responsibility of getting invoices out to their clients for the work that's either been done the previous day or is to be done. We also want to consider the timeliness of getting those invoices out to our customers as well. And it all boils down simply to the concept of cash flow and positive cash flow in businesses. The sooner you can get the invoice out to the client, the sooner you can get it paid, the less likely it is to become an overdue invoice. If there are queries, you've got the capacity to respond to them or have the client raise them in a far more seamless way. And even these days, leveraging off of the payment services that are available in a number of the software products, you've got simplification of payments. So the sooner you can get the invoice out to the client after a service has been delivered, the sooner you get paid and all of the benefits that come off of that. And this is where I think bookkeepers actually do really, really present a great opportunity to start to develop out accounts receivables as a service, as a really, really discrete service line within their practices.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, I was just going to add to that that only recently I helped a construction business, and they were exactly what you're talking about with the work-life balance. They were getting up early in the morning to be able to approve invoices, to be able to approve invoices and approve quotes. And one of the things I was able to help there with was the ability to do that in the ApprovalMax mobile app,
Mm,
and also to be able to edit things, fix up things that needed fixing on the mobile app. So that way they could be done in sort of downtimes
mm,
wherever they are, rather than having to wait till going, till they're in a computer. But this work-life balance aspect is really important. And I also think from a
it's huge.
client perspective, there's also the aspect that they could be losing business. That if they're not getting those quotes out, they're not getting those sales invoices out, and customers feel that they have to chase the
Mm,
business just to get a quote, or just to get or to get the sales invoices so they can actually pay the bill, which sometimes
mm,
is incredible. That you feel
yeah.
like you have to chase someone so you can pay the bill to them because you're a person, an honest person. Um, it kind of leaves the sense of that the business isn't very professional.
Mm.
So by streamlining this, we can help a lot.
Yeah. And I think if we break it into the two key elements, well, there's probably three key elements of what we would consider to be accounts receivables as a service too, Justin. One, I
Mm,
think, is the quoting stage. And when you talk about quoting, you want to be able to get, the quotes out to your clients in a timely manner. But on top of that, what you also want to do is have a really proactive follow-up process around your quotes as well, because
mm,
um, and I don't have the statistics and the numbers on it, but if you've issued a quote out to your potential customer and they don't hear back from you, they're probably going to forget about it. But often, if you just sort of follow up with a quick email or a quick phone call, that can actually be the impetus from them to say, "That's right, I've got that. I've been meaning to sign it to get back to you." So, squeaky wheel comes into play there. And again, if you've got a tradie who's out on site, 10 hours a day, the last thing they're going to want to be doing is dealing with emails or phone calls after hours. And quite often, the clients themselves won't be wanting to receive those calls after hours. So you could actually be really proactive with the quoting as a service or as a subset of accounts receivables as a service, because you could start to put protocols in where your tradie or whoever it is may go out and do the scoping brief with the client. Think about it smartly in that you can take digital notes these days. You've got note taking tools, you've got the ability to transcribe voice to text. There's a number of different ways in which the information can be collected, but also the way the information can be stored and retrieved by the person who might be then tasked with preparing the quotes. So getting those documents out the door much more quickly ensures that the clients or your client's pipeline of work remains consistent and filled, which means that potentially that's then converting into paid work. And we come back to the whole concept of cash flow around it as well. So I think, quotes as a service as a subset is worth a consideration, and how you can help your clients. You can monetize that as a service line within your practice, but by doing so, what you're going to be doing is adding in incredible intrinsic value to your customers. And if they see the value of what you're doing in terms of returning to, work that's now being booked that may have been missed previously because the quote was never done or there was no follow up, that's got to be a really, really positive outcome. You take the next step then, which is the accounts receivable as a service. And again, using tech and leveraging off of tech, there's some really, really smart ways that you can now step into that data that historically, I think this has been one of the barriers around us sort of seeing it as a discrete service line is, oh, all of the knowledge is in my head. You don't know enough about what I've delivered to actually do the invoice to the clients. And over the years, I've seen some, everything from simple installed, did electrical services to war and peace around, what the job entailed. And again, how do you manage and how do you work with that and provide value? So, yeah, we talked about quoting, we talked about accounts receivables in terms of raising the invoices out to the customers. But then the other side of that, I think, is also the debtor management side of it as well. Because again, if you've got a really, really clean and streamlined process, you've got a good quote, it's been approved, it's been authorized, it converts into a project, it converts into a priced invoice out to your customer. The payment side of it should then become a simplified matter. And if it's not, then you can step into the data collection side of things much more quickly as well, which again limits the risk of your client not being paid for the work that they've delivered to their customers. So all of those things all mesh together to, I think, provide a really comprehensive reason why we would, why there is value and benefit to our clients of stepping into AR as a service.
Yeah, great. So we should probably move on to talk about tips on promoting AR as a service, because I think this is the bit that a lot of the people on the call might find a bit intimidating, including like client engagement strategies and building a strong value proposition. So this is definitely more your area than mine, Cass. But like if you were um, looking to add this as a service to clients in a bookkeeping practice, how would you go about it?
Yeah. Well, I think the first and the most obvious thing, Justin, is understanding your clients' workflows or how do they work? What's their client base? How do they currently do the quoting? How do they do their invoicing? Where are their pain points? So trying to break it down and identify what their existing workflow is across those two things. And then using your knowledge and industry experience, sort of proposing to the client a level of standardization around what you do. Now, clients may not be aware that they could actually jump on their phone and record a voice message to you that could be sent via SMS or email or, however they want to get it to you. So that you can just jump in when needed and actually raise that quote. And obviously, there's some learning involved in, the language they need to use and service offerings and all of those things. But again, you've got the opportunities to set up and automate some of that potentially in the accounting software as well. So, I think the first part is having that deep conversation with your client around what their workflows are. I see some advantages in doing that too, because too often we see bookkeeping services becoming just purely transactional. Yes, we'll process your bills. Yes, we'll process your sales invoices. Yes, we'll reconcile your bank account. Yes, we'll do your BAS. Realistically, a number of the routine rinse, wash, repeat things that we're doing are going to be taken over by automation, AI. So our need to spend our time doing the stuff that really doesn't add value to the client and can be done better by an automated process means that we're freed up now to be more strategic in the conversations that we actually have with our clients. So for you to sit down with a client, go, rightio, I've worked with lots of trades or lots of consultants or lots of whatever. Here's what I'm seeing as a best practice methodology. We would love to implement that with you. And here's the advantages of doing that. We can get the invoices or the quotes out to your prospects sooner. We can make sure they're presented professionally as well. We can ensure that your T's and C's are all ticked and flicked on there so that when your client accepts that proposal, there's no ambiguity around what's being delivered. We can then ensure that that works with you and your scheduling. And, you might still have the client involved with the scheduling, or fundamentally, you might get involved in that process as well if that's something that they wanted you to do and were prepared to pay for. You might even loop around that, things like SMS reminders and appointment reminders and those things. And then when the work's been done, you've got the opportunity to step in and streamline, as we said, the process of getting the invoice for the work that's being delivered out to the client, probably within, between 12 to 24, maybe 48 hours max after the service has been provided. So, all of that is dependent on you understanding the technology that can support you in doing that, how your accounting packages can support you in doing that, but also having those conversations really, really strategically with your clients. And I think in many instances too, my experience with clients is they don't know what they don't know. So oftentimes they're doing things in their processes with their quotes or their sales invoices because they think that that's what they need to do. They think that they need to include this. They think that they need something else. And, every which way of Sunday, I've got one client who used to write literally almost a 3-page description around what they did for $100 service. So you've got to sort of understand the cost value proposition around some of that. Do they just need to know that there's been a plumbing tap installed or something
Yeah.
along those lines. If you're dealing with clients that have got to have invoices laid out in a certain way because the clients need them, and if you're talking about building contractors, they might need it uploaded through to portals and things like that, which for a lot of clients can actually be problematic to manage. And again, you can take that burden off of them and they see the value in that. If that's giving them free time and letting them spend more time with their family, or letting them do more work, or letting them go down the pub for a beer with the mates on a Friday night, then that's a value add. So when you're having those conversations and promoting this as a service, you've got to be able to hit the value triggers with your clients as well.
Yeah, that's exactly right, and, I mean, I think if we kind of frame it right, it might actually be a reasonably easy sale, because it is just something that so many small businesses struggle with. But there was a little thing that you said there that I thought picked up on, that people don't know what they don't know,
Mm,
and you could be helping them on what should be their best practice for invoice quoting and invoicing,
yeah,
and the
absolutely.
workflows that should follow. Like for example, have product and services, like non-trackable line items, been set up in Zero? And if they haven't, you could perhaps set those up, so that way it's a simple matter of doing the drop down, the drop down, and maybe having a text box at the bottom where they could put in a few extra details. But
Mm,
really streamline things up in the app. And but then we might go to the next slide, which is about key workflows, because I think we kind of
yeah. I think one of the
jumped
other
into that.
considerations, though, is fraud mitigation. And that's something that we often sort of historically think about being on the accounts payable side of the ledger. But I think it's important to understand that the accounts receivable side of the ledger is as exposed to fraud risks as the payable side is. So if you've got a bad actor within the client's business who decides to go and do something fraudulent and issue out fraudulent sales invoices and those sorts of things, or overinflate them, or change bank account details, what you're doing is or what is happening is your client is exposed to risk. So having an accounts receivables as a service process that looks at best practice and closes all of those loops, and you as the advisor are in a really, really good position to understand where those holes can be, has got to also add benefit to your client, because you are closing that. And particularly these days too, when we talk about e-invoicing, your clients might just be doing their invoices in Word and attaching them to an email and sending them out. And your client may never know that their email account has been compromised until they get the chase up. They've tried to chase up their customer payment. Her customer said, well, we paid you that 6 weeks ago, and to find out that bank account details have been changed. So there's all of those elements. As much as we talk about it on the payable side, it's as critical on the receivable side as well. And again, fast debtor catch up. So that tradie may not have chased up those outstanding amounts for 6 weeks, and yet the client paid a week after. So, all of these things come in and actually formulate what we can see as accounts receivables as a service.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the fraud mitigation, and then there's even things like making sure that discounts are being appropriately
Yep.
applied, and
Yep.
and that's where you could use credit note approvals for,
Mhm.
and yeah, exactly, and you having that visibility of what's getting
Mm,
what's getting approved and so on, and having a trusted process. But we'd kind of already touched on a few things about workflows
mm.
a little bit earlier, but let's dig a bit deeper into that. So can we just quickly bring that slide back up, Susie? The key workflow. Yep, just so because I don't know if people got yeah. So key
Yeah.
workflow tips to ensure AR success. So all right. So we could bring that back down now. I thought I'd just bring it back up so people could see it. And
Yeah. The good thing is we're not killing everybody with PowerPoint here, Justin.
yeah,
It's yeah.
exactly, exactly. Yeah, so you're kind of talking about before, like people could record a note for example, and then that could be in an app, or it could be saved in a Dropbox folder, or people could be taking a photo of handwritten notes that they want to do. There's any number of ways that you could that someone who's busy on the road could be capturing
Hmm.
what they want done, and
Yep.
then that could then be created by the bookkeeper into a
Hmm.
proper quote or sales invoice.
Yeah. So let's imagine and let's use tradies. I think they're a classic example on how this would essentially work, Justin. So,
Yeah.
old mate tradie gets the phone call and plans to spend Monday every week going out on site doing quotes. And he might book in, 5 different quotes throughout the day. And let's assume that, there's 30 minutes on site, 30 minutes traveling between. So you've got 5 hours realistically just killed going out doing quotes. Now, he's done those quotes, or sorry, he's gone out and he's sort of understood what the client wants. That's 5 hours. He hasn't done any work that day at all. So, if he's lucky, he might be able to get in and do 2 hours worth of work, 3 hours if, he's wanting to really push it. And then he's got to sit at home or somehow or other get formal quotes out to those 5 clients he's seen during the day. Not being tech savvy, he could be sitting there and it could take him 40 minutes to an hour to do each one of those quotes. So there's another 5 hours blown away conceivably within the day in just keeping up with the administration. So imagine if you had that same tradie and he's gone out, he's maybe taken some digital notes. I don't know, recorded the meeting, as you said, taken photos of the meeting, taken his iPad out on site, and as he's walking around the site, taking a video and talking to that video as well. If he's out there doing site measures, he might be taking some notes about all of the site measures. He could be talking about the number of, I don't know, taps or pipes that need to be whatever. So all of that information is being captured, and then he has that scoping meeting with the client, sits back in his truck for 5 minutes after the visit, hits send on that to his accounts receivables processor or his quotes processor. So that then comes through to your bookkeeping practice or your bookkeeping department or whoever's supporting the client through that, and you might have it so. Your service level standards with the client are, you do the scoping today, we'll have the quote out by close of business tomorrow. So there's a 24-hour turnaround on it. You get that information. You've got the five potential quotes that have come in today. You get up in the morning, you log in, and you extract that information into your quoting system. And we'll talk a little bit more about how ApprovalMax can actually help with that later. But bring it into the quoting system. It might need to go back to the client for them just to put their, give it a thumbs up. It might be that they're happy for you to send that straight out the door to the client. So that's gone out to the client within 24 hours of the site visit. Again, your follow-up protocols might be within 3 days. If there's not been a response, that somebody in the team has a follow-up phone call or perhaps sends a reminder email or something that actually triggers the client around it. That is then approved. So you've got a formalized approval process. And if you've got formalized quotes with T's and C's and approvals on them, it actually really limits the wriggle room of a customer in trying to say, oh, but I didn't know that your T's and C's were 14 days or 7 days or cash on delivery or whatever. So again, cash flow, fraud mitigation, all of those sorts of things. The work is then booked in. You might be involved in that book in process, or at the end of the day, you've got a summary to your client saying, here are the quotes that have all been approved today. Do you want us to book it in? How do you want to follow up? And then the client goes out and does the work. And imagine now they've been out and done the work. They're using the same methodology. They could be on their iPad. They could have had the quote turned into an invoice. That might be a trigger for them to say, ready for approval, ready for issue. And then you take on the responsibility of just double checking it, making sure your geocoding's correct. If you're dealing with project management software, it may need to be recorded in your job costing system properly. Or, if you're using Xero and using jobs, is that all being picked up? So what are the other things? Do there need to be attachments that go to it? Should there be photographs? Whatever else is needed to close the loop in making sure that when that invoice goes out to the client, that there's really no reason why they shouldn't be paying it as soon as possible or within the terms of trade. So all of that workflow can actually be built out. It's about you understanding the clients and the technology and melding and meshing those together to get the best solution for that particular client. Now, if you focus in a particular industry, a niche in a particular industry, that's a lot simpler because you might just be replicating exactly the same workflow between clients. If you work with variable industries, you might have a team member, if you've got a multi-seat team, that one specializes in this type of industry and one specializes in that. Or you could just be acknowledging that you're doing it slightly different depending on the industry that you're interfacing with. But it gives you the opportunity to become a subject matter expert in those industries, and that adds value to your clients through the process.
Yeah, yeah. So a few thoughts on that. So one on the recording of what happens out on site. I have a lot of empathy for these business owners because in my role I help people set up ApprovalMax, and sometimes they're back-to-back meetings, and these call recorder technologies have been a real game changer because
Oh,
even when
yeah.
I try to take notes in meetings, they're not that great. And if you ask me sometimes what happened the next day, I can't remember
Mm,
any of the details because I probably haven't had a chance for those memories to set, because I kind of quickly jumped onto the next thing.
mhm,
Um, and there's now actually hardware solutions that you can get that, like a Bluetooth that go into your pocket that can
mhm,
record. There's all kinds of different solutions. But I was going to ask you a question. Let's say somebody is working with a bunch of different industries and they
mhm,
haven't specialized. There's probably a bit of work in thinking through these workflows and building a solution for a particular customer.
mm.
So should people be charging for that?
Oh, absolutely, because that's your intrinsic knowledge and IP. And I think the interesting thing there, Justin, is you talk about, there's different solutions for different customers. And yes, potentially there will be because, you know, the type of work that's being delivered requires some additional checks and balances. But fundamentally, though, everything that we do in business is rinse, wash, repeat. Whether, I do business consulting and training or a tradie goes out, we go out, we take a scope of works off of our prospective client. Um, you come back and then you put a pricing strategy around that. You send that out to the client, you get it approved, you then deliver the work, and then you put it into your accounting system. So fundamentally, the steps that we undertake, irrespective of the client or the industry, are pretty much exactly the same. The nuances in the type of industry and the additional things or the way information may be collated, collected, presented, that's what changes. And that's where, as well, you can, if I go back to the point I made earlier, is clients don't know what they don't know. So they might go out on site and never have a conversation about what's included and excluded in, a concrete pad being laid. The client might be responsible for cleaning up the site afterwards. So all of those things you can bring in so that what you're doing is actually raising the standard of quality of the work that you're or the services that your clients are offering to their customers. And that's happening without them actually necessarily lifting a finger to do that, just by giving you information. So, yes, is the answer to that question. You would have to adapt, but I think fundamentally it's the same as on the payable side. We enter an invoice in, we check that it's okay to pay, we raise the payment, we send a remittance advice. It's the same for every client, irrespective of which industry that they're in. It's just sometimes there's some variables that we need to factor in around that.
Yeah, fantastic. We did have a question about the legalities of recording your phone calls with customers and clients. So, neither Cass or I are lawyers, so we probably can't technically answer that. But in places I've worked where they have done it, it's always been a requirement that you tell people that a call's
Mm.
being recorded. The beauty of working on something like Zoom is that it just comes up as a pop-up, so you don't have to remember to do that. But on phone calls, you probably have to train yourself to, if you're
Yeah.
going to record calls, to say that. Yeah.
And I think the other thing is, how do you approach that with the client as well? So, when your customer, and I do it now if I'm talking to different people, it's like I'm recording the session. Are you okay with that? And 9 times out of 10, the client has already seen my otter or whatever come into the meeting or the Zoom recording. And I just simply say, look, we could be talking for a good hour here. I'm not going to remember everything. Exactly what you said, Justin. You don't remember what you do from one moment to the
Yeah.
next. And the older you get, the less you remember. Is so it's and my handwritten notes were terrible. So if you're saying to the prospect that this is to enhance the quality of the information I gather from you, to make sure that when we give you a proposal, that it is absolutely reflective of the work that you need to have undertaken, then I suspect you're going to limit any feedback or any negative feedback around that. And I think in this day and age, it's becoming more and more accepted that this sort of information is being gathered now in a digital way as opposed to, handwritten notes and, the back of the whatever it is, the tradies notebook or something that gets tossed into the back seat and gets, muddy footprints over and, scrawled out in illegible doctor/engineer type handwriting. So digital is what it's being adopted. People are understanding the value that it provides in enhancing the quality of the information that's being collected, and then also the ability for that to be presented as well.
Yeah, that's right. And like, we talked about sort of Zoom recorder, where there's various different ones like um but there's also similar technologies for physical meetings as well so depending on the industry, like for even ones that are free, like yeah, there's now like a transcribing tool that's built into Microsoft OneNote.
Mm,
So you could just hit record on your device and you could take your handwritten notes, but it's also transcribing the meeting as well. So
yeah.
yeah, there are a lot of different things there. So we should probably jump to how ApprovalMax can make it easy to manage accounts receivable. So I might share my screen and we'll go in. Oh, I've got to send the request. There we go. I'll try that again. There we go. That's got it, I think.
You'll need to share.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay. Fantastic. Okay. So I'll go to the approval workflow. I'll close those off. I'll go to the approval workflow screen and I might just zoom in a bit. Okay.
Can everybody see that? Is that nice and clear up on their screen?
Why is that not working? Okay. Um, there we go. All right. So that, oop, there we go. Okay. All right. So in Approval Max, we actually do approvals for well, really four things that relate to accounts receivable. One is that we can approve sales invoices. The other that we can approve um, other that we can approve um, the credit notes, which we talked about before around discounts and refunds and things. So you could use it for that. And then of course quotes. So we might start with quotes, but I said four, and I was just thinking, usually when I talk about contact workflows, I'm usually referring to approving suppliers. But in the case of Zero, you can in fact approve contacts. So that's also customers as well. So if you're in a business where you need to do that, that could potentially be useful as well. But with the quotes, um, you can either create the quote in you can either create the quote in Approval Max, or you can create it um, you can create an Approval Max. And if we go in here, we've got the requester matrix. And in here, you've actually got a lot of control over what people are allowed to pick. So you can potentially like limit what account codes exist in, can be selected from this list. You can also make fields optional or mandatory in this screen. But in the situation where we're helping a client, what we might want to do is invite them in as a user, but make most of the fields optional, so that they could just sort of like roughly draft a quote. And then what we could do is in the approval step, in between the approval step, and it getting created in Xero, we could have a review step. So the rev and so this is where you as the person providing the accounts receivable service could act as the reviewer. And this is where all the stuff that Cass was saying about, filling it out so it's been professionally done, making sure all the terms and conditions and the attachments and all of that get added to it. You could do all this in the review step. So you could either go two options here. You could either go the option where you're creating the quote from start. So they're giving you, let's say the file, the rough file or the photo they've taken or the instructions, whatever workflow you've agreed to, and you just go in and create the whole quote for them. Or you could have a process where they start the quote in perhaps the mobile app and just do it very roughly, and then it goes to you as a reviewer. And then this is the important part. You could then set up them as the approver. So that way, what leaves isn't on your shoulders. It's actually it's still they still have the option to review it and then approve. But perhaps they're happy to delegate that to you, that responsibility to you. You could always have an auto approval rule in here, and you could have an auto repro an amount based rule that basically, if it's under a certain amount, they're happy for you just to kind of create the quote and it go through. So you could do this in a variety of ways. So what we'll do now is we'll update that and we'll go and create a quote.
I think what's important to flag here too, Justin, is, talking about implementing it as a service, you want to be as standardized as you can. And sometimes it's the piece of technology that is actually what's providing the standardization, in that everything that you do potentially can happen in ApprovalMax, but the way your client wants to work with you can change depending on whether they want to be the initiator or you're the initiator, whether they are happy to approve, you're happy to approve, or whatever combination of that. So from your perspective, you're simplifying the workflow in a standard tool that has the flexibility to support whatever variations there are for a client. And I think we were talking about this the other day too. So if you wanted the client to perhaps even set the quote up, if they're doing it off of the mobile app, they might just be simply clicking on a record button and recording voice to text through the mobile app instead of using the mobile keyboard to actually put that information. So this is where, if you know your products and you understand how they're utilized, you can actually be really, really smart in presenting this to the client as a solution to getting quotes to you in a really, really quick way. And it might start off that they want to still be the top authorizer to begin with, but as the relationship develops and they see the quality and the timeliness, they might decide to ease that back. So again, it's a choose your own
Mm.
journey with it, but you're using the standardization of a single tool to do that.
Yeah, that's right. So I'll just explain so you can fill in the customers here, and you can also give them the ability to add in new customers if that's appropriate. And then you can put in an expiry date for the quote number, the reference, title, summary, and to what Cass was saying, if you had this up on your mobile device, you could just hit the microphone button and talk to your phone and fill in this note for approver field in here, and then have that, and then that would go to the reviewer, who could then actually go and fill in all the details and the account codes and all of that, the tracking categories and all of that stuff in here, just by like filling it all in. And you've got your terms, and then you've got this area here, add an attachment. So that's if you've got terms, conditions, you've got photos, any of the other stuff that sometimes goes out with invoices, you might fill in here. So we'll just quickly populate this one, golf balls, and then test note, and we can put in a summary here, and I could tick the box, email approved quote automatically to the customer. So that's optional. And then you've got you've got it in here where and in our settings you can customize all of this email that goes out as well. Actually, sorry. The attachments that go here, these are your internal attachments. I said something wrong. These are just for your approval process. The attachment that goes to the customer, that's the one down here. Add an attachment. That's where you put your terms, conditions, and any supporting photo or anything that you want to go to the customer. That goes in here. So I'll send that out, and then I'll go submit. That's now on review because I have the review step. So a reviewer can go in and change all these things. And if they've got any questions, we've got the audit trail down here where they can come and ask you a question. So if there's any clarification that's needed, they can all be recorded down here, and they'll get a notification on their phone or via email that that a comment's been added, and then it can go in here. But if once you're happy with it, you can go submit, and then the next step would be in the kind of the situation we were imagining, it would go to the business owner to be for their approval, unless it's been auto approved, which is what we were discussing before. So we'd hit approve. And then once it's approved, it then creates the quote in Xero. So all of this is getting created in Xero as well. And just like all the other things we approve, there's an audit report attached to it. And there's even an area here where you can mark whether the quote was accepted or declined. And then you could even use our reporting tool, the reports inside ApprovalMax, to build your report of the ones that perhaps haven't been either accepted or rejected for that following up, like what Cass was talking about. Now you can there's even a button to resend the quote here, so that all helps. And I'm just going to pause sharing my screen, and I'll go on my email, and I'll show you the email that gets sent to the sent to the client. So they the quote gets sent to them as a PDF attachment, and then there's a link here which takes you into our portal for the quote. And they can look at the quote on here. They can this is the customer I'm talking about here. They can leave any comments. They can fill in the decision maker sign off on it in here and accept or decline the quote from this portal. So then when you're ready to invoice it, when you're ready to invoice it, you could then go and copy it to sales invoice, and then use approvals for what you've just seen, but for the sales invoices as well. So, Cass, do you have anything you want to add to that, or any thoughts?
No, I think what it's highlighted, Justin, is, for those that are, heavy Xero users and have been using the quote side of Xero, we know that there's been some limitations in there, particularly around who did what, who approved, and, has it been accepted or has it been declined? And I know I've jumped into some client Xero files and they've got, millions of dollars worth of active or expired quotes, and nobody's actually gone through and accepted or declined. So this is another thing you can, talking about the value add proposition when you're talking to your clients, is by making sure that the quote management side of things in terms of following up is managed, and you're either formally accepting or formally declining something and then leveraging off of reports, you can start to look at pipeline. What's the potential client got in their pipeline from a dollar value? So it's not just the the doing of the quoting, but if you're doing it in a smart, strategic, correct way, what are the other pieces of information that can be surfaced? So it could be as part of your management reporting at the end of every month, you're doing a P&L, but you're also saying to the client, we've got, during the month, we had $15,000 worth of quotes issued, $5,000 of those have been accepted. $2,000 are still open, and 4,000 of the 3,000, there's my math, have been declined. And by the way, we might know why they've been declined, and starting to give some clarity to clients around what their pipeline is actually doing, and some metrics. So again, it continues to build on the quality of information that we can provide to clients about the receivables side of their business. And again, it's using something like ApprovalMax is actually closing those gaps with products like Xero, where we know we can't get the clients to go in and formally approve something in a really nice way. We know we don't have the clear audits. They don't have the clean follow-up. It's all locked down within the ApprovalMax product there. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was just gonna, as a last thing, just to kind of um is just to show with the reports in Approval Max, we can run a report on our quotes, and one of the fields we can have is what the customer decision was and the customer decision date was. And if we go into the visible fields, um, we can there's a lot of options we can show here, like sent to customer, for example. Um, so we can and then if I and you can rearrange this as well. Rearrange. So that gives you a really easy way to see all this information. And if you want to really automate it, you can click on this little clock here, and you could schedule it. You just put in the email address you want it to be sent to, and it'll send it to you at whatever time you've indicated as a CSV file. So that'll really that'll really help you streamline your AR. Okay, just checking if we have any questions. Any questions from what we've gone through so far today, or if you're thought of anything, feel free to ask now.
I'm keen to know if anybody can see the value of this within their existing client base. And had you considered, obviously at the beginning there was the poll about it, but you know, is this now starting to sort of put the light on in terms of, wow, I hadn't thought about it in this way? It's potentially something that we could step into. So just chuck anything. A previous client, this would have been great. Yeah. I even look at, clients I was working with 3 to 4 years ago going, gosh, I wish I'd had this with them, because it would have just made life so much more simple for both them and for ourselves as well.
Yeah, well, that's some really great feedback there from Lynn. So that's fantastic. And we're just going to finish up with a poll. So, are you interested in learning more about Approval Max? And we'll just capture that, and that'll help us to know whether or not we should be giving you a call and following things up. Okay. Yeah, but I feel that was quite good. Thank you, Cass. I think it's some really important food for thought about how we can be helping clients to to get some time back in their life,
Mm,
and potentially improve the revenue side of their business by not missing out on opportunities because of slow
mm.
quoting and so on. So,
Yeah.
mm,
I was going to say, I think it is important to start thinking about it in this context, Justin, because I said at the beginning, historically, we focused probably, I think, a lot more heavily on the payable side of the ledger.
yeah,
But with the automation and technology, this is a new space to really step into as a discrete service line. And I think there's intrinsic value to practices in undertaking this work. And it sort of comes to that whole conversation that we're having about, let automation take care of the routine stuff, and you do the things, you be the human that adds value in the human value adding things. And quoting and accounts receivables is got to be a significant component of that.
Yeah, yeah. And I just think of my working life and revenue is something that businesses are willing to invest in and pay in.
Mm,
That they have sales teams and they pay them commission, and so like, businesses are very much, I from what I've observed, businesses tend to focus more on getting money in the door than they
mm,
do on the cost control side, and so, sometimes they should focus more on the cost side as well. But
yeah.
but
But
yeah,
even
yeah.
just I was going to say, think about the industries where I could see an immediate application of this. Anybody working in the NDIS space that's perhaps not using a specific tool, a piece of
Mm,
software for NDIS. When you're billing your customers through NDIS, making sure that the NDIS codes are correct and that the rates are correct. So, getting those up into the NDIS portals and making sure those payments come through in a timely manner. If you're looking at trades, I think, which is a bit of a captain obvious one there, trades and consulting, and anybody that's sort of going out doing proposals on site with clients or taking sort of scoping briefs that need to then be translated into a formal, quote document. But even if the quotes aren't being used and you're just stepping straight into the accounts receivable side, so imagine something like a pest control business where you've got a rhythm of, every 6 months you go out to do the billing for the client. It could be that you raise a whole heap of drafts and send them through to ApprovalMax for approval once the service has been delivered to the customer and it's done and it's dusted. So everything's pre-prepared, ready to go. Just needs the business owner to tick and flick and say that it's gone. So a number of different ways that you could implement these solutions and the technology around it, depending on the type of industry. So they're just, three just off the top of my head. Somebody that's perhaps going out to markets, supplying fresh food or things like that. You can imagine taking an iPad out, having something dropped off, and then just being able to get the invoice back out to the client at the end of the day. Um, Gosh, I could keep going, Justin, but I think there's so
yeah,
many applications that we could look at for focusing on revenue with our clients far more strategically than we have historically done.
yeah.